Looking for books with retro vibes? I got you covered, and I'm talking modern books with retro vibes. That will be included in this recommendation video, but also just some great freaking books, period. So let's not waste much time, and let's get started. Welcome back, fellow freaks, geeks, and nostalgic peeps, to my channel, Slime and Slashers, where, yeah, we talk about everything from horror books to other kind of books and beyond. If you're new here, welcome. I am Kelsi, and I'm so glad you are here. If you're a returning viewer, hi guys. I'm sorry I've been gone so long. It's been hard to film videos. It's hard to get back into the swing of things after everything that happened for me earlier this year in my personal life. So I am back. I am going to really ramp up as we get closer to April and once we're in April, because if you haven't heard, or if you've already heard, I am hosting Old School April. It is a readathon, but it's also a watch-a-thon and activity-a-thon. You can choose to partake in all three elements, or just, you know, pick and choose the elements you like to participate in. If you just want to do the reading part, that is fine too, of course. Do whatevs you want to do. It's really flexible and fun, and if you have not heard of it and want more details, I will have both of my announcement videos linked down below, and I will also have the link to the Discord down below because it's a great community there, and you could also get a lot of extra information there, and it's a great place to ask questions if you want help on how to go about signing up, etc., etc. But really, my Google Doc that I'll link down below and my announcement video really gives you all the details you could possibly need if this is the first time you're hearing about it. Today, I am doing this recommendation video to give you guys some awesome recs. I'm going to start off with my host book recommendations because myself and a whole bunch of my other co-hosts each get 2 book recs and 2 movie recs each. So today I'm revealing my book recs, so I'll tell you those first, and then we'll go through some books that I have read and haven't read, but that all fits some kind of prompt for Old School April. And that's the only criteria, is that your book only has to fulfill at least one prompt, and that means it meets the criteria. And our prompts are so flexible that you could literally read anything, any genre, any decade. We're talking horror, fantasy, thriller, mystery, romance, whatevs, anything you want. You should be able to read with the way our prompts are. And if a book fits multiple prompts, which, spoiler, every book you read will most likely, I will be very surprised if it doesn't, meet multiple prompts. So every prompt the book meets or fulfills, then you get a point per prompt. And I'll give you an example as we go through the recommendations. Again, a list of books I have read and recommend, and then I'll give you some ideas with books that I have not yet read but would fit for vibes that we're going for Old School April. You do not have to read nostalgic stuff, but you can. And I will be reading a mix of new books and old books, and it will all work regardless. Alright, so let's start off, like I said, with my host recs, and I'm really excited about these. And guess what? Only one of them is horror, the other is a romance. So let's start off with the surprising one first, which is the romance, I think. Dun dun dun, here we go. So I read this last year for Old School April, and this is The First Date Prophecy. This is written by Kate and Danny Temporelli. They are a real-life married couple, and if Danny Temporelli, the name sounds familiar to you, it's because he's the actor who played Little Pete on The Adventures of Pete and Pete, and he starred in many other things throughout the 90s. And it's so cool that they co-wrote this book together. It's a little bit based in reality in that they took their real-life meet-cute situation and fictionalized it. It is such a fun rom-com, and it's really heavy on the com, but there is some sweet stuff in here too. Truly think if you're a romance fan, or even if you're not, that this could work for you, and it definitely has 90s and old school vibes if you're even looking for that. You don't have to look for that in your books for Old School April, but if that is one of the things you are looking for, this has it, because one of the main characters is a grown-up 90s child star, just like Danny Temporelli, so Hence why you could see it is kind of based in reality a little bit, but they definitely fictionalize some things. Highly recommend, and the audiobook was great, so I'm excited. And actually, this isn't a host rec because I haven't read it yet, but a little sneak peek to my TBR, I do plan on reading another book by that duo, and it's also nostalgia related. I'm hoping to get to it in April. The Road Trip Rewind, and I think it takes place in the same universe as the First Date Prophecies, but they're both standalones. I think the characters might be somewhat related to these characters, but I'm not absolutely sure. But either way, I am so excited. Look at this freaking nostalgic cover. I'm excited to get to this. But the official host rec, and we do have a prompt about reading a host rec. This is my official host rec. Also, I do have a book club book that is nostalgia related, and just like the host recommendation prompt, part of that prompt also says you could also read a host book club book. So a lot of our co-hosts have book clubs, me included, and that would also count for that same prompt, the prompt called Pimp My Ride, which says read a host rec or a host book club book. And my book club book is called Agony's Lodestone, and that is definitely going to be nostalgia related. So you could read that too, and that would get you a point, plus probably many other points, as with this one. In fact, when I read this last year, just giving you an idea. It's going to vary a little bit because we have different prompts, a few different prompts this year, but this book got me 12 points last year. So I wrote the name of the book. This is how I tracked last year. I wrote the name of the book, and I didn't pick a lot of stuff out ahead of time, only a few things, and then I mood read, which you can easily do. And then I just listed the different names of the prompts it fulfilled, and I had 2 pages for one book, but I kept going. And then at the end there, I totaled it up. So pretty cool. Very, very handy dandy. A good way to do it, I think. And my other host rec is Mother Dear. I love this book. So this is a horror book, and it's by one of my favorite horror authors. Her name is Ivy Tholen. I have read every single book of hers except Tastes Like Candy 2, which is a sequel to like one of my very favorite books by her. But I love Mother Dear. If you like Serial Mom, plus like think Father of the Bride vibes, I think you could like this. It is got a lot of comedy in it, and it is unbelievable in some ways, but it's definitely a very fun, freaking old school vibe slasher. Even though it's set in modern time, it still is really, really enjoyable and has some kind of nostalgic flair, but just because of the vibes that come across. It feels like an old school slasher movie, but it's a modern book. Highly recommend. It's not for everybody, but I absolutely loved it. I think it might even be my new favorite book by Ivy Tholen, which is crazy because I've had the same favorite book from her for a long, long time, but this one just really knocked my socks off, and I am so excited to try to get more people to read it. So this is another one of my host recs. Highly, highly recommend. And I did a giveaway for this book on my Instagram and Tastes Like Candy 2. I was giving away 3 copies, and I have spun a wheel with the names of the people who entered, and I will reveal the 3 winners here now. So, dun, 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 dun. Here are our 3 winners up on the screen. If you see your name, have no fear, I will be contacting you on Instagram shortly to try to get your information so that I can send you guys the books. So 3 total copies, and all of them are signed. So I will be contacting the winners, and congratulations, and I'm so sorry it took forever to finalize this. I was going to do it in a vlog, but it's too long of a story to get into. I'm now doing it as part of this recommendation video. But once again, Mother Dear is my other host rec. So here are my 2 host recs. Again, both highly recommended. We've got a horror and we've got a romance. So a little something for everybody, in my opinion, I think. So there you go. Let's start off with some more recommendations, and these will be ones that I have read. And all of these, what they have in common is they all have old school vibes, but they're modern books. And so when I say old school vibes, it really means either it's set in the 80s or 90s, or maybe even earlier, or it references retro things or retro times, or there's some other thing about it that is nostalgic. For example, we have my first rec here, Joey Leonard's Last Horror Movie Marathon. This was such a fun read, and it definitely features old technology in the story. We follow this guy who is running the last rental store in his city, and it's finally closing down, and he finds this weird VHS tape in one of the boxes as he's packing up, and his life really starts to fall apart, and he starts to question reality after watching this mysterious tape in said box. So, highly recommend. Short, sweet. We also have a prompt about a novella. We have a prompt about old technology. We have a prompt about books with like 80s or 90s vibes, or books that are set in the 80s or 90s. This would count for like nostalgic vibes. And I'm sure it could fit even more prompts. I know we've got a prompt about yellow on the cover. Here's yellow font and like highlights here. Ticks off at least 4 or 5 boxes, just me like thinking off the top of my head right now. Here we've got Knock Knock Open Wide. This story is so unique, and it's set in Ireland, and there's a lot of strange things in this, but there's also a wonderful romance in this, so we do have a prompt about reading a book that features romance. This would count for that. It would also count for a book that could give you nightmares, because it is a horror book. Any, like, horror or thriller book could technically count for that prompt. It doesn't have to literally give you nightmares, it's just basically, like, a way to say a horror book or a thriller book, any kind of like darker book. And another thing that this has, it does reference a TV show that existed back in Ireland back in the day. So there are nostalgic vibes with that mention. And again, some prompts you might not know a book fulfills until after you read it. So I highly advise just keeping track of what you read. Like, yes, you might want to look at the prompts before you pick stuff out, but you don't have to. Just mood read, and then after you're done with the book, take a look at the list of prompts and count up how many prompts it fulfills, and that's how many points you basically earned. And just, keep track of that number of how many prompts it fulfills, and that's what you're going to submit on the submission form. But this one would really work very well for a number of our prompts. This one's a dual timeline book. It takes place in the early 2000s as well as in the 90s, and it's also got references to old school professional wrestling. It's also a very weird book, and it's got references to dinosaurs. So lots going on here in this short little novella, but it's quirky and it's fun, and I highly recommend it. And this is The Despicable Fantasies of Quentin Serkinoff. Another modern book, and this one's a more popular modern book. It's pretty well known. This is Dead 11. Not only does it have old technology on the cover, because we have a prompt about that, so it would fulfill that, but also the people in the book are living like it is in the 90s. So we've got nostalgic vibes there. So it kind of fits 2 prompts just there alone. And it also has yellow on the cover, which we have a prompt about that. It also has nature on the cover. You can see these trees and water. We have a prompt about that. So already like 4 just off the top of my head, just from memory of like, oh yeah, we have a prompt about this and that and this and that. And it's kind of long, so this is about 400 and something pages. So we have a prompt about reading books over 300 pages. This one would check that off too, and that gets you extra points if the book is longer. So, woo! Yeah. This is highly recommended. It's more of a mystery book, in my opinion, versus a horror book, but great vibes. Would be really appropriate for Old School April if you're going for, like, nostalgic vibes specifically. Also, we have a prompt about reading a mystery. I would say that this would count as a mystery as well. And it could still also count for a book that could give you nightmares, because scary shit happens in this book, too. So there you go. 2 more books that are more modern books, but definitely have retro vibes. This one, The Final Gate, it's a short little novella, and I believe this is on KU, but I wanted a physical copy. This one, really unique. It's definitely got splatterpunk vibes, and when I say that, I mean old school splatterpunk. Also kind of gives off vibes of 70s and 80s Italian horror movies, but in book form, because this is actually an ode to the director Lucio Fulci, who is an Italian director, who basically was at his peak in the 70s and the 80s in Italy. So hence why this definitely has old school vibes, and it also has yellow on the cover. So 2 prompts right there. And this one is set in the 90s, so it definitely works for that, and it would probably fulfill a whole bunch of other prompts, but I just want to recommend this because I freaking love this book. This book blew me away back when I read it. It is a weird book. It's more like weird fiction than anything else, in my opinion. It does have horror elements too, but highly recommend. I really love this author. I've read another book from him as well. I love his writing style. We also have a prompt about reading older books that were published before 2006, so published in 2005 or earlier. And if you want to see some vintage recs from me, I will link my Paperback from Hell recommendation video, my top favorite Paperback from Hell reads, in the cards above and in the description below. So if you're looking for specific vintage / paperback from hell type of recs, I got you covered in that video. This is more about showing you can read all kinds of different types of books. Like, you could read modern but still keep a nostalgic vibe if that's what you're going for, or you could read modern and not even go for a nostalgic vibe. So there are a lot of ways you can approach how to participate in Old School April, but I hope you can get a good idea of that within this video, because that was my basic goal, is to show you this is pretty flexible. and also give you some recs as we do that as well. Alright, so for the time warp prompt, which is all about reading a book set in the 80s or 90s or with a nostalgic vibe, which is basically what I've been talking about the whole time, here's some more books that I don't have in front of me but would work. Sabbath of the Fox Devils. This definitely is nostalgic feeling. We're dealing with a kid who's not really allowed to watch Saturday morning cartoons, but he does. He gets a crazy idea, and he gets wrapped up in something that he wasn't expecting. And because of that element, it definitely is old school. Then we've got the coming-of-age YA book, Dead Flip. This one definitely takes place in the past. It also features arcade game talk. Another book, Rewind, takes place in present day, but one of the main characters travels back to the past. I think like the 80s or 90s specifically. I can't remember, but it's a decent middle grade read. It wasn't my favorite, but I would recommend it if someone likes middle grade and wants to give it a chance. Here's another suggestion that I think definitely has nostalgic vibes because of Star Trek, and Star Trek in general is pretty nostalgic, but this also has humor, this has action, it's a semi-zombie tale, but like it's got a lot more going for it than just that. It also has a hint of romance. So many elements from different prompts this book fulfills. One of our new prompts we added this year was read a book that can make you cry or laugh. This one definitely could make you laugh, and it really depends on the person if it would make you cry or not, but it definitely fits that new prompt. Another new prompt we added was yellow on the cover, which I've been referencing a lot. This one has yellow on the cover. Apparently a lot of covers do, and yeah, this would probably fulfill even more that I can't even think of right now, but this is a good one, and it's not pure horror. It's got a lot more to it, trust me, and it's really one of my favorite comedy-leaning books that I've ever read. Here we have some more books with yellow on the cover that would work for that new prompt I was referencing, and two of these are also nostalgic in that they've got some nostalgic vibes, but they're not really set in the past per se. But this one, however, is not even a horror. It is like a YA romance coming of age. It made me cry. It might make you cry, so it would fulfill that new prompt we have called Monsters, Inc. It did have some charming and funny parts too, so it might make you laugh and cry, but no matter if it makes you cry or laugh, if it does one or the other, that's fine. It doesn't have to do both. But yeah, this could work for very many prompts, including one about romance, which we have. So yeah, I loved this book. This was a 5-star read for me, and I really enjoyed it, but it destroyed me. It did make me cry a lot. Just be aware of that. It's not pure romance in that, like, everything is great and wonderful. It's more growing up, learning, and that, like, not everything is perfect kind of thing. So be aware that it's not like your typical happy-go-lucky romance. It's not a rom-com. This is more of a different take. I would look into it further if you don't want something that's more emotional, because this definitely is. Alright, so back to these two. This one, The October Society, is a collection of short stories, and there's actually more than one. So this is season 1 or book 1. There are multiple seasons of these books, but I've only read this one, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm very picky about short story collections. This one also takes place around Halloween time, and we do have a prompt about that. I think it's called Halfway to Halloween. So this would work for that. Yellow on the cover, as I already said, but it also works for nostalgic vibes because it literally is set up just like the TV show Are You Afraid of the Dark. So it's got Are You Afraid of the Dark vibes, which is in itself nostalgic. It might even take place back in the 90s, I just can't remember. But even if it doesn't, I would still count it as nostalgic vibes because the prompt specifically says it's either going to be set in the 80s or 90s or has nostalgic vibes. And really that's subjective, but to me, it's hard to argue that this doesn't have nostalgic vibes, so this would definitely work. It's by Christopher Robertson. A lot of his books would actually work for a lot of our prompts. And then back to this one. This is a slasher book, but it's got heart, it's got comedy, great characterization, and what makes it have nostalgic vibes is it really feels like you're reading an old school slasher, but in book form versus watching one, like, you know, in movie form, obviously. But this has everything you would want if you were watching an 80s slasher, but it actually has even more heart and more character development, and it's wonderful. Highly recommend. This one's really underrated. Curse of the Reaper. It's by Brian McCulley. We have a prompt called Throwback about reading either Christopher Pike, Point Horror, or Fear Street. Well, this would count for sure because this is a Christopher Pike. This one's really sad though. It's more emotional. It's not really horror at all, in my opinion. This is The Midnight Club. One of my favorites. 5 stars. But really, really, really sad. Like, don't read this if you don't want to cry. So it also fit that prompt. It also has yellow on the cover. There's candlelight, fire, and the text itself is all yellow. But there's a lot of great Pikes. In fact, I just read Remember Me, which would fit for, again, the throwback prompt, but it would fit for a lot of other things as well. We also have a prompt about reading nonfiction books. Both of these are nonfiction, but they would also count for having a nostalgic vibe, because both of these do. This one has a nostalgic vibe because, of course, Chris Farley was a huge star in the 90s through SNL, through the movies he was in, and I highly recommend this. This is one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. If you want to learn more about Chris Farley and his life from the people who actually knew him, this is fantastic. It's done in interview style. And this is very similar. There's an SNL history book. It's been revised, so I haven't read it since it's been revised, but that book is laid out in the same format where it interviews a whole bunch of different people from SNL and, on screen and behind the scenes throughout its history. And it just, tells the story through interview clips, essentially, written form. This one, here's Conan O'Brien, Alec Baldwin, Tom Farley, which is one of the relatives of Chris Farley. We've got Norm Macdonald in here, R.I.P. as well. Al Franken. Lots and lots of people, but also people who he knew growing up, too, not just famous people. It's so good. It made me laugh and cry, so it would also work for that prompt, too, if it makes you laugh and cry, or one or the other. But yeah, can't recommend this highly enough. I think I even mentioned it last year in my recommendation video, but I will never stop recommending it. Never. And then the other nonfiction book I was holding up is another one of my favorite all-time nonfiction books, Inside Pee-wee's Playhouse. It's not official. It says it's unauthorized, but you know what? This is so fascinating. It talks about the artist behind Pee-wee's Playhouse and how revolutionary it was with adults, so in popular culture, not just with kids. I love Pee-wee's Playhouse. Obviously, Pee-wee is a pop culture phenomenon, or was a pop culture phenomenon, but it wasn't just because of the movies, it was because of the show as well. And I'm more of a fan of the show myself, although I do love Pee-wee's Big Adventure. This really takes a wonderful dive into the history, the creation, and some of the drama for Pee-wee's Playhouse. Highly recommend. Really, really love this. And I read this at a time where I wasn't even a big reader, and I enjoyed it. So I truly think anyone could enjoy this book. Going back to the prompt about Halloween, I've got a whole bunch of recs for that. But again, these would work for way more than just that halfway to Halloween prompt about a book being set around fall or Halloween. Here we've got Something Wicked This Way Comes. Love this book. Love this book. Highly recommend the audio, though, because it helps with the very fancy writing. It helps you digest it a little bit easier, and it's just really well done. So I love this book. Definitely set around fall, so it would work for that, and it would also work for yellow on the cover, plus a whole bunch of other things. We have a prompt about reading middle grade in YA, and this would count for that, but it would also count for taking place around Halloween, both of these. These are two books in the Monster Street series. This would also count for one of our new prompts, which is to read a Goosebumps knockoff series. So both of these, personally, I would consider these Goosebump knockoffs because there were officially some old Goosebump knockoffs that were released alongside Goosebumps once Goosebumps really soared in popularity. And we're talking about books like the Shivers series, Dead Time Stories, Bone Chillers. These are all books released in the 90s, around the peak of Goosebumps, kind of banking on that popularity, very same kind of format, formula, not as good as Goosebumps, but still a lot of fun. So those would definitely be Goosebump knockoffs. But when I think of Goosebump knockoffs, I also come to think of more modern middle grade horror series as well, like Monster Street, and there's a whole bunch of other ones that I have not read that I will point out to you that would work for that prompt as well. But yeah, these take place around Halloween. These are sweet. One of these made me cry, specifically the Halloweeners made me cry. So these could make you emotional as well. Really, really great series. Highly recommend if you've never checked it out before. But there's 4 books in the series, and these 2 specifically take place around Halloween, and I love these. One of my best friends and my co-host, Cameron Chaney, has books that he has written, and in the past they have been my host recommendations, but because I've already recommended them for every event I've ever done, I was I guess I can't recommend them again, but I kind of wish I could have. We've got the short story collection Autumn Crow, which definitely takes place around Halloween time. It's a collection of stories. They all take place in Autumn Crow, the town, and in that town, it's it's Halloween 24/7, so it definitely counts for that prompt. This one, it's a standalone book, the first book in a series of books that will be called Autumn Crow High. This one, specifically the first one, it's called Fresh Hell, and it takes place, again, in Autumn Crow, just like this collection takes place in. And like I said, in Autumn Crow, it's Halloween 24/7, so you can count this as a halfway to Halloween book, although technically this book takes place the end of the summer, beginning of the school year. That's fine, though. It still has Halloween vibes because the town itself has Halloween vibes 24/7, 365 days a year. And regardless of that, this book is amazing. Highly recommend. This is one of my favorite books of all time. 5 stars. And so is this short story collection. It's one of my favorite short story collections, period. So good. Can't recommend highly enough. Plus, you're supporting one of my co-hosts who's a fantastic person. But, like, truly, these books are great. Both of them. And you really can't go wrong with either. And look, both have yellow on the cover as well. And I know you could probably fit even more prompts with both of these. Or either one, whatevs. We also have a prompt about reading a picture book. Yes, that can mean like a children's picture book, or a children's book, whatever you want to call them. I also think it can also count for comic books, or graphic novels, or manga. So if you want to go that direction, you can do that, but I also want people to know that it is okay to read cute little picture books that might be thematic or nostalgic, and this one is one of my favorites, Sir Simon's Super Scarer. There's actually more than one in this little series. It's so cute, and you will laugh, for sure. So it will at least fit that other prompt as well about a book that will make you laugh, because it's so freaking cute and hilarious, and like, he's so funny little cutie. I don't know, I can't even explain it. It's just so good, trust me. Like, you will love it. Like, adults can definitely enjoy it. It's so flippin' amazing. Another book that definitely has Halloween vibes and would work for halfway to Halloween is Mayfly. I love this book, and it would also work for our prompt about reading a book by a female author or a book with a female protagonist. This has both. It has a female protagonist that is kind of twisted. Maeve is her name. And it's also written by a woman, C.J. Leet, and I can't wait to read her new book. I haven't gotten to it yet, but this one is a 5-star favorite for me. I absolutely adore it. And even though the whole book itself doesn't take place during Halloween, part of it does, so I'm letting you know that it can count for halfway to Halloween prompt, for sure. But I'm almost positive it can count for many more prompts as well, including a book that could give you nightmares, whatever that prompt is named. I just know that that is the prompt itself, and this is so, so good. You know, this isn't really for the faint of heart, though, so just beware, and look up triggers if you are worried at all. Also, if you don't like eyes, might not be the best thing, but yeah, eyes. We also have a prompt about reading from an animal point of view, or reading a book with an animal in it, and this would be the prompt Air Bud, and both of these books would work for that prompt, and a lot of other books. So say you want to read fantasy, you can totally use the Air Bud prompt. You can use the prompt Teen Witch, which is all about reading a book that features magical elements, or magic in general, or sorcerers, wizards, witches, whatevs, cursed objects. You can read a lot of fantasy just with that one prompt alone. There's also a prompt about monsters. Magical creatures can count as monsters as well. Dragons. I know there's a dragon readathon coming up, which you could totally do and do Old School April at the same time and double dip. I know that there is the Aurelium readathon going on, and I don't know about those prompts, but our prompts are so versatile. I know you could read for that and this probably at the very same time. So if you're doing more than one readathon and you are worried, please do not be. Old School April is so chill. It's about the vibes. It's about the enjoyment. And if you are just wanting to really have ideas of how to fill prompts, that is why I'm doing this entire video. Really, everything's pretty loose when it comes to how you interpret things. As long as you wouldn't feel bad about someone else interpreting a prompt the same way you are, then you can interpret it in whatever way you deem appropriate. So Watership Down, not a horror book, but definitely has animal point of views throughout the entire story. You're following a group of bunnies as they try to find a new location for their warren. And they go through a freaking ton of stuff and drama. But I love this book, very well written, but not for everybody. But it is for me. I really love this. My friend Ollie doesn't like it. Calling you out, Ollie. It's fine. I'm just kidding. But this was really, really wonderful book. Another book with an animal point of view, but it also switches POV, so you're not in the dog's head the whole time. But we follow a dog named Baxter in this book called Hellhound by Ken Greenhall. So good. It's so good. It's very, very dark, very freaking bleak. And we're also following like a twisted human at one point, and he is definitely disturbing. I don't like being in his head at all. He's super bleak. At least his like perspective is super bleak. So highly recommend. This is super well written, really short. You could almost count it as a novella. Yep, it's under 200 pages. So, and this is a vintage published book. So this would also count for the read a book published before 2006 prompt as well. It could count for a lot. Another vintage book, and this is my beat up copy. I have a nice pristine copy that my friend and co-host Andrew gave me. Thank you so much, Andrew. You could find him at It Came From The Page. But this is my old copy. I don't like to take out the one that he gave me that's like new and nice. It's like behind me somewhere, right? Yeah, there it is. That's like the nice cover copy that I have. But here I'm holding up the bad cover because I don't want to damage like my better one. But this one's already beat up, so no bad cover. This is a great, great book. Not only was it published before 2005, we're talking way before, in the 80s. It is wonderful. It depicts like old school gritty New York, and we're following a vampire plus a whole bunch of humans, but there is a vampire, he's our main antagonist, and he is fantastic, and apparently this character in this book is the basis for the creation of Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So when you read the description of this main vampire, you will see it is totally like Spike, like bleached blonde hair and like kind of like leather jacket, total Spike. It's crazy. Anyway, if you're looking to fill the prompt about reading a book with any kind of monster, this would do because, you know, vampire, it's a type of monster. Again, we're talking monsters. It could be completely fictional, like whatever monster you want. Werewolf, cryptid, even though cryptid and monster are technically two different things, you can count cryptids. Literally, dragons, like I said, even though even dragons in some stories can be good, we still can count them as a, quote, monster, whatever. Or you can count them as an animal companion, whatever, it doesn't matter. A great author to check out, if you're looking for modern books with retro vibes, would be Grady Hendrix. Almost all of his books are set in the past. This one in particular is set in the 80s. This is My Best Friend's Exorcism, and this one is still my very favorite Grady Hendrix out of all the books by him that I have read. I still have to read his new book, which has very mixed reviews, but anyway, I love this one. Can highly recommend this one for sure, especially if you're not really a horror person. I think this one is super approachable for people who don't even like horror, like I said, so highly recommend. His writing is great, and I think he's one of the reasons that the horror genre is becoming more and more popular again, and I just love his work. And again, almost every book by him can totally work for retro vibes. It can work for a lot of other things too, because he usually writes about female main characters, so our prompt about that would work for that. And this edition has yellow on the cover as well, by the way. So before we move on to the stack of books that I have not read, but would totally work for Old School April, let me just highlight a few things that I have read, but I don't have in front of me. I may own it, but it's not in front of me, or I don't own it. So for our Airbud prompt about reading a book with an animal companion or with an animal POV, we've got Bunnicula, which has multiple animal POVs. We've got Last House on Needless Street. And Last House on Needless Street is a more modern book, and it's wonderful. It's actually more of like a thriller than a horror book, in my opinion. We've got the prompt I Love Lucy, to read a book written by a woman or with a woman main character. The Dead Romantics would work. That's written by a woman, and it's a fantastic romance book. I love that romance book. So again, you do not have to read horror. You could read anything, fantasy, mystery, romance, whatevs. It will work. Trust me, it will work. Any book that has magical realism in it could work with the Teen Witch prompt about books with magical elements, or any fantasy book would probably work with that prompt as well. If you're looking for my favorite Goosebumps Recs, I've got two that I would consider my favorite. The Haunted Mask, of course, which also takes place around Halloween, so it would work for the Halfway to Halloween prompt. Also, Welcome to Dead House, just a great Goosebumps book, and it's the first book in the series. We have a new prompt this year about reading indie authors, or a book that was published independently in general, and two of my favorite independent authors who self-published their books would be David Sodergren and Ivy Tholen. I already mentioned Ivy Tholen, but I just want to highlight both of them because they're pretty much two of my very favorite indie authors, but there's so many great indie authors right now that you guys should check out. If you have any questions or want suggestions, always look to the Discord, because our community is really active and awesome on there, and they may be able to help you with some suggestions. But again, it could be non-horror indie books, it could be fantasy indie books, whatever. We also have a prompt called Get Shorty, which is all about reading shorter books, aka novellas. One of my favorite novellas that I read last year for Old School April was Bad Movie Night by Patrick Lacey. This one, it definitely has retro vibes because it has an old VHS tape at the center of the story, and things progress from there. It's almost like a cursed videotape in a way. And again, it would also work for that Teen Witch prompt about cursed items. So double dip in there, and I'm sure it could fit even more than that. We do have some prompts about reading diversely, which I'm really excited about, and I love that we include these. So my first suggestion for this, I just read 2 books for the wonderful I Love Black Horror Readathon hosted by Kelsi. Not me, but the other Kelsi. It's spelled different. She is over at the channel Sweetie. I love her. I'm a member of her Patreon. I think she's one of the most talented people out there. So underrated. She deserves way more subscribers and followers in general. Her art is incredible, but her channel is awesome too. And because of her readathon, I finally checked out 2 books that have been on my radar, which were The Changeling and Model Home, and both I loved. So I would recommend that for the Reading Rainbow prompt, but I know it would fit more than just that one prompt too, but highly recommend. Just read those in February. Haven't even talked about them in any other video yet. So I lied. I have another physical book to show off. So we do have a prompt about coming of age, and that is called My Girl. And the way it's worded specifically, it says, read a coming of age story or a book with a cast of kids as the main characters. So of course, Stephen King's It would work. Summer of Night. I just read this last year. Another one that I beyond love, because it's my favorite book of all time, is Boy's Life. And P.S., Boy's Life is my friend Christine and also Cliff from Cliff Dark Gems. It's their book club pick for the month of April. So their book club, it's called the Fright Club. Again, check them out. They are fantastic, and Christine is an official co-host. She's over at Secrets Read, but I am so excited. I'm going to reread Boy's Life, and if you read it, not only will you be fulfilling the prompt My Girl, you will also be fulfilling Pimp My Ride, which is about reading either a host rec and or a host book club book. It would count for that because Christine's a co-host, and her book club, the Fright Club, is reading Boy's Life. So there's 2 already, but I know it would fit a lot more as well. But yeah, Boy's Life is my favorite book of all time, and it is definitely a coming of age. It would definitely work for the My Girl prompt. If you're someone who loves translated books, we do have a brand new prompt about reading a book by an author from a country outside of your own. So if you're in the US, it would be a country outside of your own country. If you live in the UK, it would be a country outside of the UK, etc., etc. So it's a good way to get yourself to read translated works, or works that are just different from where you live, and I think that's kind of special, kind of cool. Alright, we're going to quickly go through these. We're not going to go through much of the synopses, but here are books that I have not read but would fit many, many prompts or the vibe of the readathon, or both. We will see as we go through this pile. I know this book features older technology. This is Night Film. I do want to get to this at some point, but not for this year's Old School April, that's for sure. It's too long, and I'd rather just take my time for a different month. Also, this book has mixed media elements, and we do have a prompt about that, so this could work for that as well. And it's written by a woman. So there you are, 3 prompts already, just off the top of my head, from this one book that I have not read yet. If I read it, I'm sure I could tell you many more prompts it would fulfill as well. Some more modern Goosebump knockoff books. We have Twisted Books to Leave You Shook, Spine Shivers. This is a series. Again, these are all, in my opinion, Goosebump knockoffs, but they're more modern ones, and they're all middle grade, so it would count for the middle grade prompt too. And here we have Frightland. There are quite a few modern Goosebump knockoff series, in my opinion. I don't think we would have middle grade little horror series like these if it wasn't for the popularity of Goosebumps. So that is why I consider these, quote, knockoffs, but I say that with love, you know? And some of these are even designed like Goosebumps, like this one especially. Look at the back there. Total Goosebump design vibes. 1000%. And speaking of Goosebumps, here's a nonfiction book, but not only is it nonfiction, it also has nostalgic vibes, so it would fit that, quote, time warp prompt. Here we have a book about R.L. Stine, the writer of Goosebumps, so this would totally count for nostalgic vibes. There is Something Strange About My Brain, Writing Horror for Kids, Tips and Tricks by R.L. Stine. So, pretty cool, pretty cool. Here is an example that you could make anything work. So we've got a prompt called Fern Gully about reading a book that has, like, either nature featured on the cover, or some kind of nature featured in the story. As you can see, this one has flowers all over the cover, and it's also got leaves all over the cover, and birds all over the cover. So I definitely think nature's represented here. Also, that prompt about reading a book with yellow on the cover, this one has those yellow flowers. It's got like the Reese sticker, which her book club sticker has yellow on it too. I guess I would say that counts. Goldish yellow here would count as well. It's written by a woman. Having said all that, this is clearly a fantasy book, so proof that you can literally just pick up a book, know almost nothing about it, and it could still work for our readathon. So I just want you guys to know that. It should really be fine for any kind of reader. Now for a whole bunch of books that definitely meet the prompt about reading a book with old technology on the cover or in the story. So a lot of these covers specifically have references to VHS tapes, or look like a VHS tape, or maybe even are designed like the outside of a VHS tape, but you can't see the tape itself. I still say that counts as the VHS prompt, which again says to read a book with old technology on the cover. So even a cover like this, so you can't see a tape, but it looks like the cover of a tape, like the outside of a tape back in the day. You can kind of see the tape there, but this would count. Any kind of book formatted like this would 1000% count. So I haven't read this one, but this is The Last Girl Standing. You can even see it's got like a fake little horror and comedy tag here, like you would see in the rental store on movie covers, cases, whatever. And yeah, it even says home video up here and all kinds of stuff. And even the back looks like a VHS tape. I've heard good things about this one. I've really got to check it out. Yeah, The Last Girl Standing by L.C. Valentine. Another book that looks like a VHS tape, and this is a collection of stories called Found, and it says an anthology of found footage horror stories. So I've heard great things about this, and there is a second one that just came out. I think it's on KU. So I just saw that like a second collection just like this came out. Same kind of cover design in a way. I don't know if anyone I know has read that yet, but I definitely am intrigued, but I still have to read the first one, so I guess I gotta get through this one first. I can't, you know, go a little crazy and jump the gun or whatever they say. Next up, we've got Rotten Tommy. You could see an old tube TV with those antennas sticking up on the cover, and it even says 3 unmarked videotapes hidden in the wall of her childhood home. Becky watches the tapes. She finds herself drawn into a horrific mystery far greater than she could possibly have imagined. So this is one of the David Sodergren books that I have not yet gotten to, but I really want to, and it would be perfect just from what I know of it for Old School April. So I really want to get to it. P.S. This is a spoiler. This is probably going to be on my TBR, but I would say if you're looking for even more recs about things that would fit the vibe of OSA, check out my TBR video, because I will be going through the biggest pile of possibilities you have ever seen. I'm not going to get to them all, so I would definitely check out my TBR, because all of the books that are going to be featured in that video will not be in the wrap-up or in any of my vlogs, because there's no way I'm going to get to my entire pile of possibilities. It's like freaking 50 books long, or maybe even longer. So yeah, just stay tuned to that video if you want more, like, recs or ideas like books like this, but books that I have not read yet. 3 brand new books that my friend Kat got me for Christmas. Thank you so much, Kat. Kat's a co-host. She's over at Kat's Novel Adventures. Make sure you subscribe to her channel. So this one is more about film related than like VHS tapes, but it's got like an old film camera on the cover, so it would totally work for old technology on the cover. No one really films with these type of old school cameras anymore. There's a lot of films shot digitally, I should say. Films filmed digitally. That sounds terrible. Films shot digitally, and it's really cool to see like an old school, you know, film camera with an old school reel of film in there. And I've heard mixed things about this one, but if I have the right expectations, I think I could love it. So this could be a potential for me, and it definitely could work for you too if you're looking for books that would possibly fit the kind of old school vibe. This would loosely work. Another modern book with old technology on the cover. Here we've got the VHS tape, horror movie by Paul Tremblay. Another book that I'm eager to get to, and I hope to maybe get to it in April? Who knows? We'll see. And yet another book that looks like a VHS tape when you hold it. And again, this is a very popular trend right now with modern books, especially modern horror or thriller books. We saw that with Dead 11, which I did read and enjoyed, but yeah, these 3 that I just showed, this is being the 3rd one, I have not yet read, but I'm still intrigued by them, and this one even has blood on the tape, and it's cracked. So this is Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. And last but not least, another book that looks like a VHS tape, and this is The Ring. Yes, The Ring, aka the book that inspired Ringu, the movie, and The Ring, the American remake of it. I have not read the book. I've heard bad things from 2 of my friends, but then I've heard good things from other people, including some of my other friends who loved it. So I'm just going to give it a chance. I had originally unhauled my other copy, but this is a way cooler copy. Look at the freaking VHS tape fuzz on the edges. Freaking cool. So yeah, I had to have this edition, and I'm just going to give it a chance. So I bought another edition, even though I unhauled my other one. Whatever. Anyway, we'll see. I doubt for OSA, but it could be a potential for you if you're looking for something. But again, just know that there are mixed things out there about this book. But it's actually a series. It's a first in a series. Looking for a book that has like sci-fi or science vibes, you could literally read any sci-fi, but even books that are kind of loose sci-fi like this. I would say actually this is not loose, it's kind of hardcore sci-fi, and this definitely has nostalgia vibes because we have references to Star Trek TNG, of course, back in the day, and we've got references to X-Men, so right there's your nostalgia vibes, but also science vibes, so it would count for our prompt that literally says to read anything with science, and that prompt is called The Fifth Element, which is probably pretty much my favorite sci-fi movie ever. Nearing the end here, there are plenty of books you can just pick out yourself that are middle grade or YA, since we do have a prompt about that. Literally, the world is your oyster. There are endless possibilities of what you could do, but here are some examples. So if you liked Babysitter's Club growing up, if you liked Sweet Valley books, including Sweet Valley Kids, here's kind of a spooky themed one, but you could literally pick up any book in the series and it would work. Maybe a book you did read as a kid, In a Dark, Dark Room. This one's super popular. Many people have read this. If you want to pick up some junior movie novelizations, those would count. Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, the novelization, and The Page Master, the novelization. And this one would also count for a book about books, because this whole book is about books. Here we have a Star Wars middle grade book, So this would work for like the sci-fi science prompt, but it would also work for nostalgic vibes because Star Wars in itself is nostalgic, and it also would work for, again, the middle grade prompt. So 3 right there, right off the bat. And again, it doesn't have to be horror. Look at this crazy choose your own adventure wrestling themed middle grade book. Yes, this one would work. Anything would. Here we have some books that are more modern but are set in the past. First, I want to highlight this wonderful book that was given to me by the author and his wonderful wife. This is Poppy Harp, and it's by Simon Avery. And this takes place back in 1973, and then it fast forwards later to when the 2 main characters are in their 20s, and it's even got an old TV show involved in the premise, and I'm really, really excited to dig into this, and I'm so happy the author sent this to me for review. I just have to pick a good time to get to it, but I'm definitely eager, and I'm really, really excited. I think it's going to be great, so if you're intrigued at all, I would check it out. It would definitely work for Old School April vibes, and they also sent me this cute little cute little rabbit that kind of matches the vibes of the cover, and they did that on purpose, so thank you so much. I love this. I just wanted to highlight this on my channel because, you know, I love to promote good people, so I cannot wait to dig into this. And if you're interested, like I said, it will work for OSA for sure. And here's another book that is a modern book but set in the past. This one, my friend Andrew and I freaking found randomly at Barnes & Noble when we were hanging out in person, and it was awesome, by the way. Me and Andrew had a blast, but Hampton Heights it's called, and it says one harrowing night in the most haunted neighborhood in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it takes place back in 1987, and I think our main characters are 6 middle school paper boys. So again, group of kids as the main characters, that counts for that coming of age prompt I talked about earlier. A book that is set in the 80s or 90s or has nostalgic vibes, aka time warp. This would count for that. It has yellow on the cover. It also has monsters on the cover, and it would fit a lot of prompts just from the synopsis alone. So heck yeah, this is so cool. I'm so glad Andrew and I found this at Barnes & Noble, so really good catch by really Andrew, who's the one who spotted it, but yeah, I want to get to this one day. We don't know if it's going to be April, but whatever. I just wanted to highlight it in case you never heard of it before. Here's another nonfiction book, but this is one that I have half read and half not read. You could find tons of books about the 80s and 90s and the culture, the toys, the whatever. So here's kind of one of those types of books. This is Did I Do That? The best and worst of the 90s. And also, how did I just say that so terribly? Did I do that? That's terrible too. Anyway, at least I said it with some passion there. Here we have a great nonfiction book, and it even came with like a t-shirt transfer, which I think, oh, I haven't removed it. Anyway, I could maybe do the t-shirt transfer. And it definitely uses a lot of pictures of toys to like talk about different pop culture things. I think that's a good way for them to have gotten around like the copyright issues of putting pictures of these certain franchises, but they just use the pictures of toys. So that's pretty smart in my opinion, but yeah, I can't wait to continue reading this. I've read half of it, but I have to keep going. Alright, I promise this is it. We're in the final home stretch right now. We've got these last couple of books, which are all collections, and these are old school themed collections. Now, I don't know if these are all still available, but some of these might be on KU. Not all of them, but I happened to just buy these when I saw them. So first we've got a kind of ode to Fear Street books. This is Reader Beware. So this one is very much going to have your nostalgic vibes just because of the type of book it is, paying homage to a book series that was very popular back in the time when we grew up. So this definitely will meet that time warp prompt for sure. Here we've got a tribute to the 80s. We've got Attack from the 80s, edited by Eugene Johnson, and it has a fantastic cover. It's got yellow on the cover as well. So this would work for nostalgic vibes, plus more. There's also monsters on the cover. Video nasties were a big thing back in the day, so this would count for nostalgic vibes because this is all about video nasties. And it even says, oh, I thought this was a collection. It's actually a novel. So this is a novel by Leo Dark, and I have yet to read it, but I am very intrigued. And it even looks like an old school VHS tape. So again, even though you don't see any technology, like you don't see an actual tape picture on here or a part of a tape, it looks like a tape. So again, it counts for that nostalgic technology prompt too, but also nostalgic vibes because video nasties in themselves are nostalgic in my opinion. And last but not least, this collection of 90s themed stories. Look at this fantastic cover. I have heard great things about this from my friend Ashley. I will link her channel below. She said this was awesome. She really enjoyed this collection. This is edited by Chelsea Pumpkins, and it even has a foreword by Max Booth III. And yeah, look at this. All 90s themed stories. Oh my god, guys, that was a lot, but I hope you enjoyed my recommendations. Have you read any of these books I talked about today? If so, what did you think about them? What is on your radar for OSA? If you have any recommendations for me, let me know. Again, I have not even gone through like half of what I could potentially read for Old School April. I did highlight a few things that may be on my TBR, but I'm going to have a lot more books to talk about in my actual TBR / pile of possibilities video. So if you want even more ideas of books that you could read for OSA, then I would say please check out my TBR video coming soon. But for this time, guys, that is it for me. Till next time, you know what you can do. Keep on killing it.